Amit, for that wonderful introduction, and good morning, everybody. I must confess I'm very excited. Your Excellency, Ambassador Pavan Kapoor, we're touched that you didn't hesitate, even for a minute, as you stepped into office, to accept our invitation to grace us with your presence at this symposium, understanding its significance internationally and its salience to Israeli Indians. Professor Zvi Moret, Chairman of the Academic Board of the Babylonian Jewry Heritage Center, Dr. Zvi Yehuda, Director of the Research Institute at the Center, distinguished professors, colleagues, guests, and friends. It is my privilege and delight to greet you at the opening of this first International Symposium on Baghdadi Jews in India. Who knows, maybe there'll be another one. For years, lured by the sambusak and delicious Iraqi food, I have been attending the academic council meetings of the Babylonian Jewish Heritage Center as a researcher of Indian Jewry. About a decade ago, on one of his multiple trips to Israel, during which he invariably contacted me, I managed to persuade General Jacob, in blessed memory, to donate his mother's costumes and some other valuable artifacts to this museum. Due to my close relations with the Embassy of India in Israel, I'm the founding chairperson of the Israel-India Friendship Association, and Maestro Zubin Mehta, who apparently gave the most brilliant concert last night, was the president. The items arrived duly with no problems. But besides this isolated incident, when I've actively helped build up the collection of this amazing museum, I felt that I hadn't done enough to justify my wolfing up those delicious sambusak at each meeting. So at the last council meeting, I suggested organizing an international symposium on the Jews of Baghdad, from Baghdad in India. I believe that many of my colleagues at that meeting might have been skeptical, but I was confident. For years, I have built up relations with a fine cadre of people the world over, who are either of Baghdadi origin or who have devoted some of their lives to researching this amazing community. And amazing they are. At best, the Baghdadis in India were 100 or 150 years, but they left behind a legacy which still dominates three major cities today: Mumbai, Pune, and Kolkata. There is nobody in India who has not heard of the Gateway to India, financed in large part by the Sassoons. Many in Bombay know the Sassoon Docks, the Sassoon Library, the clock tower at Victoria Gardens in Baikala, the statue of the Prince Consort with a Hebrew translation at its base, the Sassoon cotton and jute mills, and so on and so on. In Pune, the extraordinary spire of the Baghdadi synagogue Lal Dawal, pointing to heaven, and the Sassoon Hospital are evidence to other Indians of the power and philanthropy of this tiny Jewish minority. And in Calcutta, urban landmarks fossilize the presence of the now nearly extinct community of Calcutta Baghdadis, who will always be remembered by fellow Indians as the Jewish Arabian princes of the East. However, the Baghdadis are amazing from another point of view. The Jews of the Raj had a glorious life, complete with servants, summer houses, clubs, and racehorses, the historical illusion only to be shattered by Indian independence in 1947. They were different from their colonizers in color, religion, and status. Yet in different contexts, they identified with those very colonizers. After the withdrawal of the British from India, with whom the Baghdadis had associated as non-Indians, many decided to emigrate to the UK, Palestine, and then Israel, and the US, and others settled permanently in Australia and Canada. They left with very little ado. As soon as they departed, they adapted with impressive ability to economic hardships, machines instead of servants, and European culture instead of that Iraqi Indian melange that made their lives so special in India. Their resilience is one of the most impressive things I have ever encountered. With no complaints, with no grudges about their fate, they adapted to the new hosts and societies and moved on. Most married members of the local Jewish communities in which they integrated. However, in all these transformations, they never gave up one thing: family. Their sense of community and togetherness to this day goes beyond globalization. Their interdependence defies national boundaries. And this is exemplified today. After a few emails which I initiated, the Baghdadi community rallied together. All the academics on this program come from the wider gamut of the Baghdadi Indian Jewish diaspora and all the other lecturers at their own expense to take part in this international symposium. Where does this happen in other academic conferences? My own friends, personal friends from the Sofa families, my friend Linda Rifkind of the Rembaum family, Sam Marshall and Ruth Solomon, and others agreed spontaneously to sponsor the symposium. Much has been said and written about the Baghdadis in the Far East, but this is the first time in history that a conference is being held about their history and heritage and their achievements in India. And would India look the same without the Baghdadis? The immediate answer is no, for the contribution of the Baghdadi community to India was significant and enduring. General Jacob, Zichrono Livracha, will remain part of Indian history for many generations to come. Not only was he responsible for negotiating the surrender of the Pakistani forces in Dhaka in 1971, but he also entered politics subsequently, holding politics such as the governor of Goa and Haryana and the Punjab. Throughout, he was both utterly loyal to India and a proud Jew and a fierce supporter of Israel. The idea that the focus of the symposium had to be on India was supported with tolerance by one and all. And for those interested in the Jews of India, this perhaps will be the opening or the first in a series of future conferences. The organization leading up to this symposium has been witness to the flexibility, adaptability, and positive disposition of the Baghdadi Indians. And it could not have been done alone. My thanks to the museum, which readily threw its doors open, to Ronit Azuri, its general manager, to Limor Katan, who was a huge source of help and support, and finally to friends in the Baghdadi community. I would like to mention in particular Edwin Shuker, who came especially and has devoted many years of his life to preserving the heritage of Baghdadi Jews in India. All these people supported my serendipitous idea and my insistence that this conference on India had to be done here in Israel. Thank you very much. I now call on His Excellency, the Ambassador of India in Israel, Mr. Pavan Kapoor.
Good morning, Dr. Shalva Weil, Mr. Ronit Azuri, Professor Mori, Ambassador Zui Gabe, who I was very pleased to meet just now, friends, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to be here today. And as Dr. Shalva Weil mentioned, soon after I came here, which isn't so long ago, I was very pleased when she told me that she was organizing this symposium, the first of its kind, to look at the International Symposium on Baghdadi Jews in India. And I was, of course, very pleased with the idea, and I said, of course, I'll be there, and not knowing, of course, as to how things would turn out, but fortunately things have worked out, and I'm so really very pleased, and so nice that I've had a chance to meet some members of this wonderful community in the past, but to see everyone here and just meeting and greeting a few as I walked in, it's really a wonderful feeling. So thank you again, Shalva Weil, for this. We in India are, of course, proud not just of our Baghdadi Jewish community, but the entire Jewish community that we have in India. and also, of course, of the fact that we've had no recorded instance of any anti-Semitism throughout the 2,000 years plus of Indian Jews living in India. Okay. It's a fact that, along with freely practicing their faith in India, the Jews peacefully coexisted with other religious groups. A striking example of that is the Chendamangalam synagogue in Kerala, which is situated in close proximity to a Hindu temple, a mosque, and as well as a church. There will be no religious tensions there at all, and all religions organize their respective processions very peacefully. Now, while I understand that considerable work has been done in the past on the Bene Israelis in India as well as the Kochini Jews, and here I'd like to definitely acknowledge the works of Nissim Moses, Shaul Shapir, Shalva Weil, of course, and many others who have documented this fact and looked at how the preservation of Indian Jewish history can be carried forward. I think there's still a considerable way to go with regard to studying the Baghdadi Jews in India. So I think this symposium is extremely timely, and once again I commend Dr. Shalva Weil for taking this initiative. While the Baghdadi Jewish community was the last of the Jewish communities to come to India, they left a lasting impact on, certainly on Bombay, Calcutta, and Pune, as Dr. Weil mentioned. I understand they were largely a mercantile community with a history of maritime trade. And according to some accounts, Shalom HaKohen was the first recorded immigrant who arrived in Surat in 1798 from Syria, and soon became one of the wealthiest merchants in that port city. And it was he and his family who later moved to Calcutta and formed the base for the Baghdadi Jews in that city. In a similar vein, the Baghdadi Jews of Bombay owe a lot of their history to the Sassoon family, as we just heard again, led by Sir David Sassoon, who arrived in Bombay in 1832 after fleeing persecution in Baghdad. And I think the economic prosperity of the Baghdadi Jews in Bombay was visible with the Sassoon trading empire spreading out all over Asia by the late 19th and early 20th century. I think it's a fact that the Baghdadi Jews have contributed immensely to the heritage of Bombay and Calcutta and Pune, and in a sense far in excess of their actual numbers. In fact, in this context, it would also be interesting to see what connection there was, if any, between the Baghdadi Jews and the Parsis, who also similarly contributed quite a lot to the heritage of Bombay. Maybe that's something that Dr. Weil and others could look at on some other occasion. As again Dr. Weil pointed out, the contribution of Baghdadi Jews in diverse fields. She talked particularly about the institutions, synagogues, schools, hospitals that they have left behind is tremendous. But also even to Hindi cinema, when you have the actresses like Sulochna, Nadira, very famous and contributed in a big way. And of course, to the Indian Armed Forces, somebody like Lieutenant General Jack Jacob, to whom this symposium is rightly dedicated, great war hero of India, and somebody whom I'm proud to say was actually for the last several years living in the same locality 3 blocks away from my parents. They still live in the same locality, so great privilege. But people like all of them who I think their contribution is a tribute to their contribution to India, even while retaining their traditional Jewish rituals and traditions, and I think that's true for the entire Baghdadi Jewish community. We are now, of course, working to preserve Jewish history and culture in India, but I must confess, this is proving somewhat difficult with the dwindling number of Jews in India, and this is seriously a matter which I think people need to ponder about. According to our latest census in 2011, we had only 4,650 Jews in India. And I fear that the number is even less now. There are now reports say that there are about 40 Jews in West Bengal, about 20 in Kerala, still about 2,500 in Maharashtra. But I must confess, I was recently at a I was at a there was a group, the Taglid group had come around, and somebody came and said, well, why don't you come meet these young boys and girls? And I said, okay, but if you allow me to say what exactly I will want to say. And it's interesting that you've got these people still coming and to visiting the Holy Land, but talking to them, I was struck by what was motivating them to come here. For some, it was, of course, just to visit the Holy Land. For others, it was looking at economic prospects. But certainly, the approach was that many of them would try and move here. And I said to them, it's excellent if you do that, but just keep one thing in mind. If we want to preserve Indian Jewish, the Jewish traditions and culture in India, then some of you have to stay behind too. But, anyway, in this regard, I think the recent decision of the government of Maharashtra to accord minority status to Jews in India would possibly help in preserving their heritage. They will hopefully be able to contribute a little bit more in terms of money and looking after their heritage. And it's a welcome sign now that both West Bengal and Maharashtra, the two states in which Baghdadi Jews are present, have given minority status to the Jews. While the Jewish communities have maintained their distinct traditions and rituals in India, our effort in Israel is to bring them together under the umbrella of the Indian Jewish Convention. And I would certainly urge all the Indian Jews here, particularly the youth, I see a few of them around, but still I certainly would urge them to participate actively in making that a success. We have the next National Convention of Indian Jews scheduled in October this year at Kiryat Gat, and we will work towards making that a success. Like I said, you've got experts here all through the day, and they'll be telling you much more, and I would also hope to learn much more, but I wish the symposium and its participants good tidings, and look forward to learning more about the Baghdadi Jews from the deliberations of this conference. Thank you very much indeed, and good luck.